So Adrian, your practice has also evolved to include an international structuring product and service to clients. Do you want to tell us more about that?
Yes, Jana. So when we first started our practice, we were predominantly helping clients with transactions, usually along the lines of fundraising into their businesses to help them grow. And from 2009, very shortly, we realized that most of that funding was sourced from offshore investors. And as a result, those investors wanted offshore structures to land their cash into. It was really just a case of investors saying, love your business, but what I want to do is protect this cash from domestic, social, political, economic risks that you'd have in any African country from their perspective. And our goal then was to try and remove as much friction as possible from attracting that funding. So the result was that we had to set up a turnkey solution in an area of law that was tremendously complicated and only really served by the big law firms and accounting firms at the time. And also served in a way that wasn't really appropriate to a tech startup. They love working with listed companies and so on. Where we were acting with companies whose entire staff complement was smaller than the compliance team in one of those listed companies. So we had to really find a way in which to match the services with the need of the client. And then obviously one thing we never really solved was the transfer pricing solution. And as you know, transfer pricing fundamentally is about demonstrating how the relationship between a South African company and an offshore company that are connected is on arm's length. And that's when I came to you and I said, Jana, how do we solve this problem? It's a difficult body of law. And you took the bull by the horns. Maybe you'd like to explain how you went about that.
Yeah, it was interesting. It was a good opportunity as well to be part of the international structuring team and work with the team. So it was just a good opportunity to take. And in terms of learnings from that, what we've tried to do is obviously to focus on the needs of the clients that you would typically service in the products that you provide and the service that you provide. And in that approach, we've taken the view to have a simplistic type solution where we try and focus on the specific client, the functions of that client, and then work with the client over time to also make sure that the transfer pricing policy, as it is an internal document for the client, can evolve over time. So it's not a static process and a static policy, so to say. It's something that clients should understand may evolve over time and may change over time as functions within the organization change.
Important, because our clients are evolving so fast. They're
Absolutely.
going to look totally different in a year's time.
Yeah.
So it's great to have a solution that tracks their evolution.
Correct. Yeah, that's the aim, that we can provide that service on a continuous basis. And then make sure that the client stays in line with what should be arm's length, considering the current position of the client. And it's not practical, obviously, to do that every month or every second month. But my suggestion and approach on that would be to perhaps say check in on an annual basis and make sure that you touch base and discuss what has changed within the organization. And they'll obviously also work closely with your team and the way in which you track progress on the functions that you create for clients in the offshore entities.
But Jana, transfer pricing is notoriously hard to understand, to skill up for, to learn. Where did you find this information and what was the source of your skills?
Well, it's challenging. That is indeed correct. The OECD guidelines, that is the main source of information, and that's the go-to for all practitioners that work in this space. International case law is obviously something that would also be considered. I mentioned earlier on that we've got very little case law available in South Africa, which I believe will change over time, and we might see more of that coming. But at the moment, as it is, it's really interpretation of what we've got in terms of availability and resources on the guidelines and commentary on that. And from there, we built the product as we've got it today. Do you want to talk about IP Incubator and how we assist clients in their journey with their international offshoring?
Well, you mentioned the OECD guidelines, which is the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development.
Yes.
And this is a remarkable source of information for us lawyers, because what they really did is produce in a series of documents, but they produced the International Tax Code. And the International Tax Code really says one thing. It really addresses one scenario. How do you allocate the profit of a group between companies that are related in different countries? And it does that in quite a simple way, despite there being 1,000 pages of the International Tax Code. It really says where are the functions located that create the value of this group. And they map those functions in a simplistic way. They map those functions to the creation of profit and they allocate the profit accordingly. And what was fascinating from our perspective as international structuring lawyers for South African IP-rich tech companies was using those same principles to identify where those companies' IP could be if they wanted to follow that roadmap. And essentially what the International Tax Code does is it says your IP will be located in the countries in which the IP creation functions are located. And those are quite straightforward as well, quite logical. It's where's the creative mind, where is the body that takes the risk decision in development of the IP, where's the person that controls the delegation and outsourcing the IP, where is the commercial model created and deployed from? And finally, where's the ongoing enhancement, maintenance, protection of that IP managed from? And if you use those 5 pillars as a roadmap for the future location of IP, it creates a tremendously valuable opportunity for a company to adopt a strategy to locate their IP offshore. And in South African context, where we're not allowed to move IP offshore, it helps them to address a future whereby their IP can be anchored in the country, which will more easily attract funding and perhaps even gain a greater value on exit.
All right, and IP incubator in that process, the product itself, do you want to talk about that?
Yes, a good point. The IP incubator verifies the implementation of that IP strategy. There's one thing to have a lovely all bells and whistles strategy, but a lot of our clients are relatively small and can't necessarily show continuous evidence of the implementation of that strategy. And because it's tremendously important in South African context, if we get it wrong, we might be seen as illegally exporting IP. We provided a service that verified the implementation. So we can go so far as create and maintain the IP ledger of the offshore company and track each IP feature back to the functions performed in that country and show how they made the South African IP, where appropriate, redundant even. And so effectively migrating the value of the group to the new IP that's driving the value of the group going forward.
And the beauty of that is then that the client will be able to prove compliance with the legislative requirements, and also from a due diligence point of view, they can show where the IP actually is owned.
Exactly. Some of our clients regard it as a preloaded answer at due diligence level for instances where an acquirer or investor is perhaps wanting a little bit more comfort that the IP was genuinely located offshore.